I've always looked at it as, look, it's you can be penny wise and pound foolish.
Yeah.
And as long as you're driving the organization to assimilate to the tool, start using it, you're meeting milestones, you've got a good project management team on implementation, then I don't fear having those people around because usually I've budgeted for it. But number two, I know that if I pull the plug on them too early, I'm going to spend a whole lot more money digging out of that mess later.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. While ERP systems have come a long way with their capabilities and faster time to value, these investments still take a long time to deliver value to your business, even if you may have gone live within 90 days. Also, you will uncover real issues with the ERP system once you start running your business on the new system due to the lack of interest from most stakeholders during the testing and implementation phase. Finally, the post-implementation phase may cost you more than the pre-implementation phase. But if you pull the plug after investing for many months or years, cleaning it up and upgrading to the new system may be even costlier. In today's episode, our guest, Matt Dietrich, shares his insights on why ERP implementation projects must be treated as a journey instead of a one-time deal. He also discusses the importance of a fully connected ERP system, even for commercial decision-making, and how to spot old versus newer ERP system with deeper capabilities to drive the decision-making. Finally, he outlines why committing to a platform and continuous investment is more important than upgrading it every couple of years. Let me introduce Matt to you. Matt Dietrich is CEO of Elko Manufacturing Corporation, a middle-market contract manufacturing machining business based in metropolitan Cleveland, Ohio, with over 600 employees and 7 production facilities located across Midwestern states. Elko is a private equity portco of Middle Ground Capital based in Lexington, Kentucky, and New York City. Elko specializes in high complexity machining and metal forming of steel, brass, aluminum, and specialty alloy materials for a wide variety of applications. Diverse end markets served by Elko include, for example, fluid, power, energy, transportation, and various consumer products. Matt brings over 32 years of professional, functional, and executive leadership experience along with a broad perspective in leading, profitably growing, and operationally optimizing diverse global industrial and automotive manufacturing businesses operating under public, private, foreign, and private equity ownership. He has developed an extensive commercial, strategic planning, and execution background with notable expertise involving many key facets of complex, successful B2B businesses. These include commercial processes that ensure profitable organic growth, systems for enabling and sustaining the journey towards operational excellence, comprehensive technology and automation integration, business platform development, and M&A strategy and integration, in particular involving businesses operating in bespoke, engineered components and system design, manufacturing, OEM, and distribution channel management, and high-tech manufacturing capital equipment end markets. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sam. Good to be here.
Amazing. And I'm super excited to dig into your background. Obviously, you have done a lot of different ERP implementations, and they are always fun, especially when it comes to doing this for manufacturing companies. And obviously, you have tons of background there. Just to kick things off, do you want to start with your personal story and your current focus, Matt?
Sure. Well, generically, I'm a 30-plus year guy. I'm an engineer, but I've come up through engineered products manufacturing businesses. And I look back over the span of those last 30 years, specifically relating to things like using tools like ERP systems. I've operated in the public company arena and private equity arena. So all of them have a little bit different twist on investments that they make and expectations they have for certain tools they use and ways they want to run the businesses efficiently. So it's given me a perspective, I think, that has helped me, particularly as of late, understand what I do want to do and what I don't want to do when it comes to ERP systems.
Okay, and that is going to be a learning that not a lot of people have. You really want to hone down in terms of what anybody is really capable of doing versus not capable of doing. So I am glad that you have at least figured that out. So we are going to dig into all of those stories. We have one more standard question that we ask every single guest, Matt, and that is going to be your perspective on business growth.
Well, I think generally speaking, it's a race to efficiency. That's what enables differentiation, which facilitates growth, profitable growth. So when you think about the things that you do to work on the business, tools you use within the business to help you be efficient, help you be differentiated, that's one of the reasons why I love talking about ERP systems, because it's the backbone of all of the different moving parts of a business as a machine of generating profitability for the ownership that makes everything work. So it's something that I think you can never be fully completed in doing. It's always a journey. And even you look at the sophistication of the systems that are in place now versus even 5 or 10 years ago. It's just amazing what they can do, and new skill sets they've given businesses to serve customers in a way that changes their expectations of what's normal. And that's kind of the exciting part when you think about companies that are even perhaps in an old technology business. Well, they could be new technology if they're using these tools correctly. So
you bring a very interesting point, and I would definitely be interested in digging a little deeper into that, and that is going to be thinking of ERP from the customer's perspective. I don't know how many businesses really think from that perspective. So let's dig into your story first, okay? The ERP story that you wanted to share. And by the way, Nisi, when I think of the ERP, sure, ERP is a great tool, or any tool is a great tool. But then we need to have the business context. We need to have a compelling problem before we start solving that, right? So tell us about the backstory of the business in which you implemented the ERP. What was the business like? What was the business model, products, customers? How big was the business? How was the organization?
Sure. Well, the first half of my career, I worked for 2 very large public companies that were engaged in steel manufactured products businesses, all bespoke, a lot of customization. And like many companies like that, they may change an ERP system every 10 years, if that. Many of them still have homegrown systems. But as of late, most realize to be competitive, they need some of the functionality that only the more recent kind of tools in that space facilitate. So one company I'm thinking in particular had a legacy system, and they entered a period of very prolonged high market demand that outstripped capacity. And the existing system was limiting their ability to capitalize on that. Not just inability to secure growth, but ability to satisfy current businesses and not have all the customers hate you. So that company went through a pretty large transformation to a mainline ERP system while I was running the commercial organization, sales and marketing and customer engineering, that type of thing. So very much was front of mind in my daily life and that of my team is that we had an inability to leverage the system in a way that would allow us to make really smart decisions in that kind of a market environment. Too much demand, not enough supply. So the system that company invested heavily to go to, well in excess of $100 million in many, many years of implementation, allowed that company to really start to decide who and how to serve under what conditions under this prolonged multi-year upmarket. And that created a lot of really interesting kind of dynamics and stories as you think about customers that were used to being treated a certain way. And all of a sudden you had information that actually would allow you to treat them a little differently, sometimes better, sometimes not so much. Perhaps they weren't as profitable. Example that always comes to mind is some customers that would be very bad at forecasting, very bad at giving us their demand signal and constantly changing orders last minute.
Yeah.
And you think about the inefficiency that creates in a manufacturing plant, and the fact that unless you know that that's going on, if you're just accommodating the customer at every whim, you think you're doing them a favor, and you're actually you're degrading your ability to serve most of your customers well. So that reality caused this investment in a large change to a very, very fully holistic kind of an ERP system. And as a result of that, the information that was now available allowed us to go in and prioritize customers based on profitability or set up rules of engagement that limited their ability to do things that would create unnecessary churn due to lack of planning in factories that were already very, very full. So just making that change across a customer base of literally thousands of customers all at once with a couple hundred salespeople was a pretty amazing experience. But at the end of it, once you got customers to realize that by cooperating with this kind of new approach, they actually could get better performance in terms of reliability of deliveries or shorter lead times, they started to see the benefits, and it really started to change that customer behavior. And that's great for a lot of reasons. But on the internal side, it allowed us to be more efficient, which allowed us to be more profitable and understand things like where our pricing was for similar parts across multiple industries. Maybe we weren't leveraging that correctly, or maybe we weren't serving customers that had earned a position of perhaps they should legitimately expect a little better service. So that's the big takeaway of that experience. And since then, I've gone through multiple ERP system changes in other businesses I've run, other different platforms, none of them as sophisticated as that one, but at least the concepts I was able to take into those other businesses, and no matter what the tool was, and still try to prioritize things like rules of engagement or profitability maximization, or cutting down on expediting just by having some sense in the beginning of the demand signal process.
Very interesting story. So obviously, I am going to have a lot of questions to dig deeper into that, and I like to peel. My listeners are familiar with me, how I like to do the interviews. So one of the questions I'm going to have, just to provide a little bit more background in the story, because one of the things that you did not touch is going to be the kind of products they were selling. So you did mention that they were in the steel industry. The demand was really sort of outstripping the supply that they had, and they had challenges because of that. So this seems like slightly more commoditized manufacturing. So do you want to mention a little bit about the product mix as well? What kind of products they were selling? And if you have seen the similar product mix in the other situations as well?
Yeah, the product mix in that particular business was pretty complex.
Okay.
Everything from very small volume, high complexity bespoke products to mainline catalog type product.
Yeah.
All of it went across the same set of factories and assets. So all that complexity had to be managed adeptly by the system.
Yeah.
And including all the inputs and all the outputs that you expected. So that definitely was a factor. I will say that was a complex business relative to others that I've run, but every business has its own little personality, and depending on what the levers are that you need to manipulate to make that business successful, it helps you understand what kind of a tool and what kind of attributes and features and you want in that tool when you select it and when you implement it.
Okay. Amazing. So I need a little bit more background there. So you did mention that, you had a little bit of customer driven demand. And when I think of that, I am going to think that this is going to be slightly more high volume manufacturing. It is going to be slightly more forecastable parts, as opposed to this one, the one that you mentioned that, these were the custom parts that you were building. So why were they customer demand driven? And do you want to paint a little bit more colors into the product mix? Provide probably an example of what kind of product it was and which industries were using it.
Sure. Well, the this particular business was a base manufacturing a basic component that goes into most machinery, most mobile equipment, or many different markets. And that product was such that it had a lot of sub component families.
Okay.
So you may have one particular type of an industry that's driving demand of one portion of that family, but not another, and another that's has much more spotty demand. It's not as forecastable. It's got some special features they build in later in the product. Balancing that was really the essence of getting the most efficiency, the most throughput across those assets. You could serve the most customers in the best possible fashion. So I think forecasting. You mentioned if any kind of a piece of or a product line or piece of business is forecastable, that's great, but there's always some error induced in that. Nobody's perfect. Otherwise, everybody would be in the stock market and not working. So there's inherently an inability in some very, very large industries to give reliable forecasts out past 3 months, much less a year or two, when you're doing major planning and deciding how to configure your footprint. So all of that plays into the system's ability to take information on the front end and manipulate it in such a way that presents you with choices, information to allow you to make choices and make decisions that ultimately give you the best possible mix of results. And I think that's what a lot of companies struggle with in the absence of a well-defined ERP system, even to this day.
Yeah, I completely agree. So let's go back to your comment about, you handling more of the commercial aspect of the business. And I talk to a lot of, commercial guys who are handling either the sales, marketing, or the customer service. They are not going to be as connected with the operations. Obviously, everybody is going to be sort of connected, but not as connected because they are trying to run their own budgets. They are trying to run their own departments. And I don't know if you are familiar with the CRM systems. If you look at CRM systems, they are going to be slightly more siloed as compared to your integrated ERP system. So let's say if I'm talking to one of my mid-market executives, and this is the story that I get all the time, they have two choices. They can either implement a sophisticated ERP system, or they can implement a CRM system that is going to be slightly easier from their perspective because they are, let's say, either spending money from their own budget. They don't have to talk to finance and operations. They don't have to have these massive meetings, and they can probably roll out the CRM in 4 months, and ERP is probably going to take 12 months or whatever. So from their perspective, let's say if they are going to make I don't know if you are going to call this a mistake in terms of rolling out the standalone CRM, because that is actually going to have all of those integration needs. But you did mention that, you need to make these smarter decisions. Now, the smarter decisions are really in the commercial department. You are making that, right? So you need a lot of data. So can you make these decisions, let's say, if you were to roll out just the CRM implementation as opposed to having that integrated ERP system?
I don't think so, because I think the backbone is always the ERP system. The CRM on top of that is very, very useful because it enables things like a robust S&OP, or sales, inventory, and operations planning, because that's where a lot of the inputs will come from, is the market and customer level information that drives demand forecasts, right? And that's half of the equation, is the demand forecast. So I think you can have an effective business that runs with a very, very good ERP and no CRM, but it's so much better with a good CRM that's integrated. At the same time, if I look at a business with a really lousy ERP system, but they went out and bought, let's say, Salesforce, which is a very well-respected, very well-developed CRM system, I think they're going to struggle, no matter what, how good the sales and commercial people are doing to use that CRM system. So it's good to have both, but if I had to prioritize one or the other, I would do the ERP system first, and then layer on these other ancillary systems that really allow you to maximize it.
Yeah, so obviously the struggle is very subjective depending upon how much money you have in your bank account, because you can probably integrate anything and everything. You can develop whatever you want, but at the end of the day, what is going to happen is that is actually going to drive a lot of custom code. It's going to drive broken integrations. and then you are going to get a lot of issues because of that. By the way, there is another twist in that. So let's say if you have CRM system, they are not necessarily meant for the SNOP planning, to be honest. Okay, they are really the data entry tool for your customer interaction. In fact, the way I like to define the CRM systems is going to be any of the pre-sales process is really good in CRM. So if you have really sophisticated pre-sales process, that's going to be your marketing automation. You are doing a lot of work with your lead generation. You are doing your marketing department is very sophisticated. Maybe you have a product that actually requires a lot of marketing. For example, let's say if you are in the ERP sales business, you need to put a lot of effort in your marketing and sales. You might not be putting as much effort in the actual implementation, but your marketing is going to be thicker. For example, let's say if you are selling a very heavy material handling equipment, okay, in that you need to put a lot of effort in marketing. So that's where your CRM is going to be super handy, but you still require your ERP. Your ERP is not going to be as heavy. But the businesses that you are describing, for those, obviously you are going to be having super heavy ERP. But the SNOP processes that you mentioned, for that, you have some more tools. Okay, so you are going to probably require a tool for your FP&A process, a specialized tool for your inventory or SNOP process. Okay, then you might have some more planning there. For example, if you are doing human resources separately, so you might need a separate tool for that, because ERP is really going to be the system of record. They are not necessarily as good at planning, depending upon how robust you are in planning. So you are going to require all of these systems. So sometimes that gets super confusing for people. Have you seen similar scenarios when you have run out of any specific capabilities in the implementations that you have seen, and you had to bring in a specialized system?
Yes, in fact, in one particular business where they did not have a CRM system, they had to kind of do it the old-fashioned way. You think about when you're loading forecast into an ERP system, it's always traditionally been a very manual process. When you think about layered programs of new businesses that are launching, pieces of new business that launch over time, and getting that to be able to be part of the forecast, doing that manually is very difficult. You tend to do it as a discrete snapshot in time, whereas another business where we had both, we had put in a really nice ERP system and a CRM. A lot of that was automated, and we were able, by maintaining customer level new programs and pipeline data, we could load that into the long-term forecast that fed the ERP inputs and got a much better result on the back end. So there's an argument for both and for automating all of these processes. I think if I can go up to 100,000 foot level, it seems to me, as I've watched businesses evolve over the last 30 plus years, 35 years, ERP systems have been around for a while, but they've gotten so much better.
Yeah.
But the idea of a CRM, a true mechanized automated CRM, is a relatively new phenomenon in the landscape, like in the last 10 or 15 years max. In fact, probably in the last 5 or 10, they've really gotten good. So it was kind of the last frontier when you think about a business as a box with a crank on it, and you're turning the business model and hopefully spitting profit.
Yeah.
That was one of the last business processes that was not fully automated and integrated with the rest of things like PLM systems for engineering and manufacturing, and ERP systems and HRS systems on the HR front. Having the commercial information all automated as well just makes everything work a lot better, like a symphony, and helps the business sing.
Yeah, I completely agree. So when you look at this evolution of the ERP systems, and you have referred on this comment a couple of times in the conversation that, they have come a long way, obviously. There's no question about that. But let's say you have some of the manufacturing executives, and they don't really know how to either procure the ERP systems or compare the ERP systems. For them, what they typically do is they are going to pick the checklist. They are going to compare the features and capabilities. Look, whatever you did in 1980s from the capabilities perspective, your business is probably the same right now as well. Okay, but overall, from the technology perspective, overall, the capabilities of the systems, they have come a long way. So let's say if I were to ask you, okay, describe the evolution of the system. What are the changes that you have noticed in your experience in these systems that you can spot? No. This is the 15-year-old. This is the 5-year-old. This is the 10-year-old system. This is 25-year-old. How do you spot that?
Well, boy, I mean, if you take big picture swaths at that answering that question, you think back to back when things were on green screens, 4100 systems back in the 80s, even,
Yeah.
a lot of company. And just getting that into the place where we had point and click kind of, web interface kind of user interface for those systems, that was a huge evolution. But beyond something as simple as that, it's really more about the expanded functionality and access to information, your ability to manipulate information and organize it in a way that it gives you trends and gives you information that leads to conclusions that force a decision point that ultimately helps you solve a problem. That's where I think you've seen this evolution in ERP systems. And they're, as I said, so good now, so many of them, that it really comes down to matching the best tool to the particular type of business you have and the struggles that your business is experiencing that you're trying to solve. And there's a whole process for doing that a lot of companies will start out doing self-study. There's all kinds of flow charts and things you can find online to help you kind of get at least a start at organizing your thoughts.
Yeah.
But I think the facilitated approach to evaluating different tools is a better route to go. You'll save time. It'll cost you a little money up front, but I think you save money long term. And then you go through the whole RFP process where people come in and you give them some surrogate data. They do some analysis, come back with a proposal, give you demos and show you how the software will help solve the problems that you've articulated. And they speak with data, and you go through that several times. You start to get a really good sense for what the current state of the options are for yourself. And then it's about making that investment and the commitment to stick with the investment. I say that because I remember back in the same time frame that I was implementing or involved in it, helping to implement that ERP system, that large public manufacturing company, there was another similar size multi-billion-dollar company putting in the same software suite. And they went about 2.5 years, spent, I think the rumor was $125 million, and then pulled the plug because they didn't view it as a journey. They wanted it to be kind of a, put it in, spend the money, and away you go. And I think you have to look at this as many times you're changing your entire process from new business development, order to cash, all the way through to fulfillment and collection of. You're changing that so much that it's a cultural change. It's a mindset change. Yeah. And I think the biggest piece of advice is you think you've done all the hard work when you started in the beginning, going through an evaluation, made a decision, picked a solution. You're implementing it. That you've done most of the heavy lifting. That's not even 10% of it. It's really sticking with the investment you've made and getting the culture in your company to back off and abandon those old ways, those old workarounds. The Band-Aids and bailing wire they used to have on the old homegrown system, that allowed them to do certain things in a certain way. And often they'll lose some of that functionality in a short-term way by going to a new, better tool. Yeah. And you have to get them over that hump until they realize that the new tool actually is going to make life better for them. Maybe not in the exact same way, but it all will come together once they all assimilate to the change and use the tool. So I always think about that, and I've always remembered that story of that large company that spent all that money, got halfway into it, and then it decided to abandon it. And we're right back with their old tool again, and a whole mess and a bunch of angry people inside their company, angry customers too. Yeah. And that's the kind of commitment I think that is required when you're putting in one of these systems. But boy, the benefits are there, and I think that's why these are not these have been around for a while, and they're here to stay. And to be competitive as a business, I don't care what your industry is or what your business model is. If you've got any size or scale, you've got to have sophistication and automation on these kinds of processes, or you're just not going to be competitive.
Yeah. So I like the way you are calling this as a real commitment, and I like to define this as your marriage. Obviously, you need to have sophisticated process. If you are getting married for the first time, it's very likely that the marriage is not going to work because you have zero experience in getting married, right? But you might get lucky as well at time. So when you look at the commitment, what are different things that you are looking at in a system, in a vendor, when you are committing to that specific vendor? Because you want to make sure that they are going to be around in the market, the technology is going to be good enough, your people are going to like the tool. There are so many different variables. And I like the way you define this as more of the journey, because you require commitment. And if a lot of things are not going to work out for you during that journey, obviously you have to pull the plug at one point of time. So define, what do you see in a product or in the vendor when you look for committing for next 10 years of your life or maybe entire life?
Well, in my experience, one of the most expensive attributes of putting in a system like this is really the implementation assistance you need. And
Yeah.
most of the software guys have, if they don't have in-house capabilities to do implementation, they certainly have certified partners. They tend to be basically they're very expensive, and it usually tends to take more time than you originally planned to have them stick around. But I would say even more than that, because that's sort of a basic component to implementation. You have to have consistent, continued support by the leadership. And I mean the ownership, the board of directors, the senior management of the company, that this is not the program du jour. This is not what we're using this year and we'll use something different next year. No, this is the commitment we're making as a business, the investments we're making. We're going to make this work.
Yeah.
And then you also have a very, very good change management, kind of agents of change or champions that help the company culture get over that hump of resistance to change, which is natural, and really kind of assimilate to the new tool and the new way of doing things and abandoning the old things. A lot of people waste a lot of time in the first third of an implementation, wringing their hands and thinking, boy, the good old days. The old system was so much better in this way or that way. And, those may even be true in a small sense in their little particular part of the pie. What they're not seeing is the big picture, is those were actually holding us back. And I think that's where I talk about leadership. You have to have continued engagement with the population using this tool, so that you're talking about how things are getting better, even if they're getting worse right now. The big why you're doing this, why you've put in these certain features and gotten rid of others. And ultimately, I think you can see this culminate in whether customers are happy or not. That's why I've always kind of liked the commercial involvement in these things, because that's where the rubber hits the road. That's where you're hearing about customers angry about not getting their product as they wanted it or on time. And if you start to see some benefits on that side, it goes a long way to calming the organization down and telling them to stay the course, stay on track. This is a journey, not a destination. And even when we get really, really good at this, well, then we're going to upgrade. So I think that's the path that you have to walk when you're going to take on a change in this area.
Yeah. So let's talk about the journey and obviously the budgetary planning a little bit more. So you mentioned that obviously if you work with the consultants, they are going to be slightly more expensive, right? So I don't know, how do you typically plan for budget? Do you have a specific amount allocated for these consultants all the time so that they are supporting you? Do you typically develop your in-house capabilities? Now, I am actually going to tell you one story related to the decision making in case of an ERP, because ERP systems are very complex, right? As you know. Now, if you don't understand how the relationships in the data objects work, or how the master data works and what implications it's going to have for your specific business process. Because think of ERP as the complex machinery, and the way you are going to change your objects, that's how your configuration is going to be. That's how your tooling is going to be inside an ERP, right? That's how your production process is going to be. So in this particular case, these guys decided to do things on their own because they were thinking that consultants are slightly more expensive. So what they ended up doing, and there is nothing wrong with that decision, to be honest, okay? So rather than creating the customer as the customer in the parent and child hierarchy, they defined some of those branches as they ship to. Okay, now they got some other tools, and now when you have to talk to the tools, the customer that this tool 1 understands is going to be different from what tool 2 understands. Okay, and now what we have to do is we have to change the entire customer master. So whatever they have done, that tiny decision that they have made, because of that, now they have to re-implement the ERP. Can you believe this? Okay, so some of these tiny decisions could be very expensive. So in your experience, what do you recommend in terms of the journey? Do you typically take advice from the consultants, at least at the solution architecture level, or do you typically do this internally until something breaks and then you call the consultants?
No, actually, the way I've always done it in multiple companies, both large and small, is it's part of the project plan, right? Yeah. Larger businesses have the advantage that they may have functional resources, permanent headcount that are very good, and a broadly staffed and well-equipped IT department that's capable of handling a lot of things well like data migration, which is a key element of an ERP implementation early on. But other smaller businesses just don't have that. They're going to have to rent that help. And so the way I've always looked at it is it's a rare case when somebody's just going to buy a software package and say, thanks for the disks. I'll see you in a couple years when you're ready to upgrade, and I'll do this all myself. Most of these involve, if you're serious, you're going to budget in having some people that are really good at implementing implementations over multiple periods of time and months and maybe even years. So it's part of the budget. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's actually more efficient than trying to do it yourself or trying to thrift that. My only point is that there is always pressure from day one because of the expense of those facilitators of implementing a software package successfully that says, well, do we really need these guys for another 18 months? Can we cut this off by 2 months? That type of thing. But I think I've always looked at it as, look, it's you can be penny wise and pound foolish.
Yeah.
And as long as you're driving the organization to assimilate to the tool, start using it, you're meeting milestones, you've got a good project management team on implementation, then I don't fear having those people around because usually I've budgeted for it. But number two, I know that if I pull the plug on them too early, I'm going to spend a whole lot more money digging out of that mess later anyway. So there's a place for that. I think it's just part of good project management.
Yeah, but I mean, if you really think from the CFO's perspective, so let's say if I'm trying to act as a CFO of a ERP project, number one, I don't want to be in that place, to be honest, okay? Because it's a very, it's not a comfortable situation to be in. Because as a CFO, what I want is I want some sort of reliability. But as far as my experience goes, being in this space for roughly 20 years, it's very, very, very hard to get reliability in case of your ERP project, because obviously you have a lot of different moving parts, a lot of different variables. So let's say if your CFO is going to ask you, okay, how much money do you need from my side? How much should I allocate for you? So, okay, so initial plan is going to be, let's say 9 months, 10 months, whatever. You did the project, maybe it was 20% over or whatever, and then you implemented. After that, it's going to be a journey, as you mentioned. So how much budget do you typically allocate for the improvement in your ERP? Because you are going to require those to support your business goals, to support your reporting, to support your decisions. As you are going to be learning more about the business, you have to put some more money in the ERP system. So in your experience, how do you typically allocate? Do you allocate, let's say if you are spending, I don't know, man, maybe $100,000 on the licensing of the ERP, then you are going to keep, let's say 50,000 for the implementation, 100,000 for the implementation. What is your thought process in terms of budgeting for this?
Well, when it comes to budgeting and justifying an investment in a program like that, clearly I think you have to show that you've thought through whatever period of time you think it is going to be that you need to implement, including those contingencies, things like keeping those folks around longer than you originally planned. But the important point is to show progress, forward progress, and that improvements may be 6 months. You've got that full cadre of outside assistance helping you with a plan to step that down by 10% every quarter, every month from there. And I think you evaluate based on milestones once you get to those places, whether you should follow the plan or deviate from the plan. Here's the reasons why. Here's the justification why. I can tell you just because not only because the IT projects like this usually fold up functionally under the CFO, but the CFO relies on a good implementation to get good financial consolidation capabilities, which he's very interested in. They are usually right on board with you saying, I don't want to cut 20% of my consultants loose this quarter because I think we have a few problems I want to button up first before we lose that talent and they disappear back into the ether. They know us. They've been around here for 8 months. I don't want to start over with somebody new in 6 months because we have a problem we didn't fix now. So those things you kind of get through in managing the business like anything else as you go. But in the very beginning, I think you budget for it with a reasonable justification for a slope of how long you need these people for and when you taper them down and what your expectations are in getting this thing up and running and being able to stand alone without those people forever. So I think that's just responsible planning and project management. It's responsible in a fiduciary sense to your stockholders or your board, but also in your as a leader and a steward of that business, you have to think through these things and be nimble enough to know when it's going well and when it's not. And if you have to change course, you do. And everybody tries to minimize costs and investment, but I think it's better to have these go well and stay the course than to try to thrift them halfway through and they don't take, people revert. The other lesson I always think of when I think about implementations like this is the tendency of the incumbent folks to keep the current system in a parallel sense and keep two sets of books until they believe the new system is going to work for them. I've been around organizations that have done it both ways.
Yeah.
And I think the most value is when you just rip the Band-Aid off, pull the plug, and go. Because very quickly it gets everybody aligned and you stop this noise and churn that happens when people are battling old system versus new or old data. How many sources of truth can you have when you've got that kind of a situation? So those are the big lessons learned that I think about when I think about what these programs that have gone well and ones that have been a little more rocky. So.
Okay, amazing. So that's it for today. Do you have any last minute closing thoughts or remarks for our listeners?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things I always say is when you think about what makes a transition and change go well, whether it's ERP system or anything else, is you have to over-communicate with the employees that you're expecting to be users and involve them. Don't just drop things on them, but have to have a lot of consultation, a lot of hand-holding, explaining, sharing successes. Those types of things are much more effective in implementing change within an organization, cultural change that aligns with your strategy of getting a tool like this in place than just brute force from the top-down leadership, do it this way or there's the door. So I think that's my biggest piece of advice for anybody considering a change like this is involve your employees and over-communicate.
Okay, amazing. And my personal takeaway from this episode is going to be, obviously, ERP systems are going to be amazing. They are going to provide a lot of value for your business, but you have to treat this as a real journey. You have to plan for a journey. It's not going to be just one-time project and you are done. If you treat it as a journey, then it's going to be more successful. On that note, I really want to thank you for your time, man. This has been a powerful episode.
Well, thank you, Sam. I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Matt, head over to alco.com. It's ALCO.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Rich Said, who describes his journey and the pitfalls of implementing 6 ERP projects throughout his career. Also the interview with Jim Banaski, who discusses the nuances of the distillery industry and its manufacturing and production processes. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.